I'm not, I sent it out to everybody.
Okay, I'll handle it. Cool. So a little bit about me. Haley kind of said, so I've worked for Atterbury Green. It's really weird because I'm not talking to you guys too. So I worked for Atterbury Green for 8 years. I started there out of college, more in the sales side, and then I moved into management. And for the last 4 years, I've been on a strategic role with that company, helping them to move forward when it comes to putting processes in place and really strategic planning in a way that moves the organization forward. A few years ago, I saw a huge gap with a lot of small businesses in that same place. And that's when I started my own business, helping small businesses with the same thing. Because like you said, I feel like it's really important. Everybody starts their business or starts their organization with a really awesome mission or vision. And what I've seen a lot with strategic planning is that it's really overwhelming, right? There's all these fancy big words. We have all these amazing, awesome ideas, and then we fall short on the execution. It's really hard to move an entire organization forward. And so what I've found is when you have a really simple process, it makes it really easy and really fun. And so what I'm going to go through today, and once the slides come up, is kind of walking you guys through a really simple, easy way to do strategic planning within whatever size organization you have, whatever size team you have, to help you to move your organization forward. When I say team, I don't necessarily just mean the team within your organization. Sometimes that can mean the community, right? When you're trying to get your message clear, strategic planning can really help you to do that, because then you know exactly who you are, what you're doing, but more importantly, who you're not and what you're not doing. It's really easy to say yes to everything and then end up with this huge list, and everything sounds great, right? Everything's an awesome idea and everything would be amazing. But based on your resources, maybe everything, you can't do it all, right? And so when you do strategic planning in this way, it helps you to really know where is your fence line, right? What are the things that this year or in this time frame, based on the season we're in, it's something that we can do. And then most importantly, and this is my favorite part, is the execution and having the right tools in place to make that easy. What I've seen happen a lot is that organizations come up with these amazing ideas, right? We have this list, you have like a strategic planning session and everyone's psyched and excited, and you have this huge list of ideas and everyone's like, yeah, we can do this. And some things get assigned, some things don't. And you get back together for the next meeting and nothing's really moved, right? That is the part that is really disheartening, right? And then it gets frustrating. And then you feel like the entire strategic planning thing was a total waste of time, and then everybody starts getting mad at each other. And I think we've all been part of a team in this way at some point, right? So the last part, and we'll talk through this because there's 4 kind of steps to this, is really setting yourself up for success in the execution side. So having the right tools in place that aren't cumbersome, that help you to be able to manage whatever you're trying to make happen on the next steps. So it's kind of a little basic overview. If we're good to, are the slides ready?
Almost.
Okay,
We're needing to share them with share screen with the.
Oh, okay, cool. Sounds good.
Sorry.
Perfect. You're fine. I can just keep talking. So, are there any questions about any of that before we jump into the slides and everything I'm going to go over? Cool. Sounds good. I got my phone. I can start talking. If you guys are okay with that. Yes. Don't be sorry. Part of what I do actually is managing technology, so I am totally okay. Yeah, this and honestly, well, and honestly, this stuff only happens in situations like this.
Exactly.
You can practice everything and have everything perfect, and then when it's time, it always goes wrong. Okay, so first big piece is, why is strategic planning important, right? I think I kind of talked a little bit about this already. It's the cornerstone of where you're going and how you're going to get there. So a lot of times organizations will start with why they exist, right? But getting the execution part can be really challenging. So big reasons why it's important is that it allows for clarity for your team. It keeps you focused, like I said, with your boundaries of what you're doing and what you shouldn't be doing. It enables you to reach your goals, because for starters, everybody's on the same page of what your goals actually are, right? It keeps you really organized, because when you have really quality strategic planning for a time frame, and what I recommend doing, and we'll talk about this, when you're setting your mission and vision, that's more of a big picture thing. So that's like your 5-year, where you want to be then. But when we're talking about your strategic planning and your goals, I like to focus on those for a year and then evaluate them on a quarterly basis. So you know exactly what you're doing today, tomorrow, the next day, the next quarter. And it really helps you to plan ahead for what you're going to need. So if you are setting your strategic goals for 5 years ahead, and you know your vision of where you're going, and you're setting your goals for what you're going to make happen this year, you have a much better idea of knowing what resources you need, what tools you're going to need, and you can get them ready before you're overwhelmed. So in my own experience in working with Atterbury, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the company, but they grew significantly since I started with the company, almost doubled their corporate staff in the time that I've been there. And they did it very quickly. And a lot of organizations do this, right? You're growing, you add a bunch of staff. Your processes worked great when you had 4 people. Now you have 8 people doing the same thing, and things start to kind of fumble, right? And so when you do this well, you can plan ahead for that. And before you hire the 8 people, you have the systems in place to withstand that, right? The other great thing is when you do this well, it keeps you organized to know we're going to need 4 more people in the near future. So are we going to have the finances for that? Do we have the systems in place? Nothing's worse than finding out that you're completely buried and having to rush to hire somebody and getting the wrong person, or getting the wrong team member, not having the process in place, having them break everything. So it really helps you to get organized and know where you're going and the best things to do today to help prepare that, right? The other big thing is without having strategic planning, moving an organization forward can be extremely difficult. Depending on the size of your organization and the size of impact you're trying to make, it can just honestly make you want to crawl into your desk. So it's just super, super important. So what I've seen a lot with strategic planning is that people get really overwhelmed by the process, right? So I like to keep it extremely simple. I think the more simple you can make it, the easier you can communicate it to everyone that needs to know, right? So I break it down into 4 very, very, very simple steps, okay? So the first big step is focusing on your why. If you don't know why you exist or where you're going, it's really hard to know what you need to do or how you need to do it. And I've seen a lot of organizations kind of skip over this part or not be really clear on this part. And so what ends up happening is your what gets really mucky and the how never really happens, right? So you have to start with your mission and vision. So your mission, most of you with what you guys are doing have really strong, awesome missions, right? So you guys know why you exist. But do you know what the vision is for the next 3 to 5 years, right? And can you clearly and simply say it and explain it to someone, whether it's someone in your own organization or someone that you're trying to communicate to when it comes to fundraising? Is it clear and concise to where somebody who was maybe 5 or 7 years old would understand? I think what happens a lot with strategic planning is we want to sound smart, right? It's just how we are. We want to use the words. We want to use our own language, our own verbiage from our own world. And unfortunately, not everybody knows our verbiage. And I struggle with this even in explaining strategic planning, right? Because I have my own lingo that falls within this, and I hate using the buzzwords, but that's just the way my brain works because I'm an expert in this thing, right? But if I come up here and start talking to you guys about alignment, blah, 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 you glaze over, right? That's boring, awful, not good, doesn't connect. So it's the same thing when you are communicating that with the people that you're talking to, whether it's within your organization or outside. Your vision has to be something that they can understand and get behind. And so this is kind of the first step. The second step is going into the what. So what are the core focuses that can move that forward? The third step is getting into actually setting the goals of how you're going to make that happen in the time frame that we're setting the goals for. And then the last step is the most important, the execution. It's actually making it happen, right? And so I'm going to walk you guys through each of these steps, which is some high level step things that you can do to help make this happen easier. So the first big thing is setting strategic planning sessions, okay? I've found that it's really, really successful when you do these in a very focused way. So creating the right environment with the right people to have these conversations. So I always recommend doing these in sessions off-site. Not necessarily, if you have a room like this where you can keep everybody out of distractions, you can use that. But something about being physically somewhere else changes your mindset. A lot of times I've done them like at Revolution 800 where you can like rent a conference room. There's a lot of different options in town where you can do that. But doing them off-site, even if it's just someone else's conference room, changes the environment of where your brain's at, and it gets you to just, it clicks different, okay? Next big thing is to create a timeline and agenda with breaks. The reason why this is so important is you want people to be able to focus. And if they know that and I do this every hour. So I don't do sessions longer than 50 minutes because your brain cannot function that long without a break. And with all of our devices and our phones and our responsibilities, if you tell people that we're going to talk for 50 minutes about this thing, and in this session, here's our deliverable, I need you to focus. Well, you're going to have a break in 50 minutes. People will keep their phones down. They'll stay focused. They'll pay attention, and you'll get more out of them. The other big thing is, and I don't know if you guys have done a lot of research on this, there's a really great book about this that Brendan Burchard wrote called High Performance Habits. When you work for 50 minutes and then you stop, give yourself a 10-minute break, and then set your intention of what you're going to do for the next 50 minutes, you actually have more energy and you actually get more done. So this is super important when you're doing this because it allows people to A, stay focused, but B, they set the intention of what they're about to do. And we all decide what the deliverable is going to be for that session. And I always send these agendas out before we actually have the sessions. So they know, let's say it's a half-day session. We're going to do these are the 4 sessions that we're going to do. They're going to go from 8 to 8:50, 9 to 9:50, 10 to 10:50, 11 to 11:50. We'll have lunch. This session, the goal is to do these 3 things, and we're going to leave the session with this. So when everybody sits down, and this is really great for meetings too, not just strategic sessions, but everybody sits down, they know what we're doing, they know when they're going to get a break, and they know what we're all leaving with. And if we don't leave with that, then we got a problem, right? This is why, and I have the 4th one down, having a facilitator or a leader is really important because when things start to derail, you can use a parking lot. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a parking lot in this, well, obviously we all parked in one, but in this concept, right? So when things go off, a lot of times when you're doing strategic sessions, people come up with awesome ideas and you don't want to shut down the idea because the idea is awesome, but maybe it's not in alignment with what we're trying to make happen in that session. A facilitator or leader can say, that's an awesome idea. We're going to put that in the parking lot and we'll talk about that when we get to that part. Usually in my strategic planning sessions, I'll have a parking lot, like actual section where we just talk about parking lot items, but that helps you to keep everybody on track. And when you don't have a person that's set as the facilitator or the leader, things can kind of wormhole. And it's not because anyone has bad intentions. Everybody has the right goals. Everybody wants to do stuff. People get excited, but this is how you can help make sure that you stay focused and get the most out of the sessions that you're having. This is part of the meeting expectations too. So the first beginning of whenever I do these with anybody is we set the expectations. So when we come in, we say, and depending on the energy or the culture of the group, sometimes these expectations have to be a little bit stronger, right? When we do them, depending on the group that I'm doing them with at Atterbury, some of the team is very glued to their phones. So I have to make it really clear that no phones during this time frame, right? Depending on the topic, if it's something heated, you can have some predetermined expectations of we need to be respectful, no interrupting, things like that, ground rules, but it just really depends on the organization and the passion behind the topic, right? Depending on what it is that may not come up. But it's really important to set those expectations before, because then as the facilitator or the leader, you have the ability to push them back to the expectation without attacking the person, right? So you can say, okay, the rules are we're doing this, remember Sue, if there's a Sue in here, I'm sorry, I'm not calling out Sue, but remember, come back to this thing, right? And then it's not about the person. And then this all kind of comes back to the same thing, having a set methodology. So everybody knows that we're going to go through 4 sessions today. These are the topics of each session. This is our goal for each session. Here's our rules of how we're going to engage during the sessions. You're going to get breaks at these times. And I usually will actually write them on the board. Next break, this time, next session goal, on the board so everybody knows. Then everyone's comfortable with the environment and they can really focus on what we're here to do. So are there any questions on this part before I jump into going into the mission and vision? That was a lot of information. Golden? Okay, cool. So mission and vision is starting with your why. Obviously the mission is more than your why because it's your mission is your why. Your vision is where you're going, right? But this is the heart and the guidepost of your organizations. The leaders and the team all need to agree on this. Usually it comes from the leadership, right? But what I have seen in the past is making sure that if you have an established organization, make sure you include your team in this, because if you just come in and say this is who we are and it doesn't align with what they feel like it's who you are, you're going to end up with obviously a misalignment, and it causes this energy of being dictated to, and it doesn't create inspiration, right? And the goal behind your mission and vision as a whole is to inspire, right? It's why you exist. So it's really important that everybody agrees on it. Some questions you can ask or work through is who are you, like who you are, right? What do you stand for? Why do you exist? And then on the vision side, where is the organization going to be in 5 years? This part is where it's really important for, a lot of, if you read about mission and vision or like mission statements or core values, sometimes they get really corporate-y, right? They sound really like, we exist so that all people in all of the world can feel really good. Like it's like, you couldn't, like, it's just words and words and words. Keep it really simple, right? Why do you exist, right? And it doesn't have to be buzzwordy, just simple and easy, right? Where do you want to be in 5 years? We still want to exist in an organization. We want to make the community a better place. That can be your vision. It can be that simple. It doesn't have to be, we want to exist in this part of town so that we can help this group. And it doesn't have to be that detailed. It just needs to be a guidepost. It needs to be an inspirational reason of why you exist. A great talk about this is Start With Why with Simon Sinek. It's on as a TED Talk about this. It's really, really good. But it helps you to start understanding the why behind it. And he actually talks about the psychology of why the why is so important and how it drives behavior and really gains buy-in. But this is the first part you have to know. I've seen a lot of organizations try to set their strategy without really being clear on what they want their organization to be in 5 years, and it gets really wonky. So if you have really big goals to grow your organization into something that's 4 times the size it is today, your strategic goals need to look different than our goal is to exist the way that we are and keep building at the same, just maintain where we are, right? So make sure you're really clear on why you exist and where you're going. Okay, that's the first big part. So once you know that portion, and that part maybe takes more than 1 session. For the record, that might be something that takes multiple conversations depending on how clear your organization is today and how clear you are of where you're going, right? The more misaligned your organization is, the longer that takes. Another big thing in that is something you can play with is the values of why you exist and the values of who you are. These tools become, when you know your vision, you know your mission, and you know your values, it becomes really helpful in hiring and building your team too, because it's really clear if this is who we are. It helps you make decisions on how you're going to handle things, but it also helps people understand that maybe they're not a fit for what you're trying to do or that they are. It helps you to answer, let's say hypothetically, are we going to give money here or not, right? Based on the values of why you exist. Same as you as a human, right? So if your values are honesty and integrity are number 1, if somebody doesn't have honesty and integrity, you're probably not going to spend time with them, right? So it's the same thing with your organization, knowing the values and helping the whole team know this is who we are, helps everyone to function as one entity, if that makes sense. Which I know a lot of this sounds like, obviously, but I think when we think about it separate from ourselves versus the organization, it like, obviously, you have values, right? But sometimes it's hard to think about how an organization can have the same thing, but it's all very similar. So once you know why you exist and where you're going, it's time to figure out what you're going to do, right? What are the core pieces of making this happen? So strategy is the core of what you're going to do to make your vision happen. This needs to be super simple and easy to understand, right? This becomes your fence line of what you're going to do. And if you have more than 3 focuses, you have one. Okay. So I know that sounds harsh, but if you try to do more than 3 things at once from an organizational standpoint at a strategic core level, you're going to have scattered focus. And I can assume, and I'm going to show you guys in a second, Disney Corporation has a lot of resources, right? I'm using them as an example because I know what their core strategic focuses are. They have 3, right? So if Disney Corporation doesn't have the resources and that corporation is like ginormous, right? To do more than 3, then I don't think any of us probably do either, right? So I know it's really hard to only pick 3 because there's so many things we want to do. But if you can pick 3 and stay focused, you can actually get more done and be able to do 3 more and 3 more and 3 more. So these core focuses should be the big, huge rocks, okay? So they're the big things that move your vision forward. So in the example of Disney, they have 3 core focuses. They invest most of Disney's capital into branded quality content for creativity. They use technology to make things more compelling and reach more people, and they want to grow globally, deepening the connections of markets around the world. That's their core focus. Now, underneath that, do they have 100 projects? I'm sure, right? But if it's not one of those 3 things, it's outside of their wheelhouse. It's a no, right? And if it doesn't fit in one of those 3 things, that's not it. And I would imagine, I don't know their exact mission and vision, but this is where it gets really cool. If your mission and vision is clear and your core strategies are driving your mission and vision, then the goals that you're creating, which we're going to talk about in a second, are in alignment with your core values. And now all of a sudden, this is all just kind of coming together, right? It all just aligns. So if you can keep this really high level, but the core things that move your organization forward, it helps you to stay really, really focused. Are there any questions on all of that? I know I'm talking kind of fast. I do that. Okay. So the next part is setting your goals, okay? So once you know what your core strategies are, this is the fun part where you get to start kind of brainstorming on what are all the how ways that we can make this happen, right? When you're doing these brainstorming sessions, they're really, really fun, honestly. But one of the first things that I like to do when we're doing this is, in the military, they're called after action reports. But the first thing that I think is really important is to evaluate where you are. So a lot of times we start getting into these setting goal sessions and we just start focusing on what we want to do. And we haven't evaluated maybe where things are working great, because you don't want to break something that's not broken, right? But where are things that are not working and what needs to be different? So a lot of times before I do these sessions, I'll actually have that be the pre-work. So I'll have the group come up with, based on the different categories of the business or just as a whole or the organization, what's working really well? What are we really good at? What are things that are not working so well that we're not very good at, right? And what are things that just need to be different? This pre-work can really help get people in the right mindset of where you're going. And then sometimes I'll do it anonymously depending on the culture of where things are at in the organization. And then we'll go through it. What you'll see when you do this independently and not as a group is that a lot of people see things the same. And if you do this where they do the pre-work and then send it in, some people are more outgoing, some people are more quiet, right? And in a group setting like this, I'd imagine even if we did it right now, there'd be half of you that would speak, half of you that would be more uncomfortable speaking, and somebody would say something who's got a stronger personality that could sway somebody that might be, oh, that's probably a good idea, right? So if you do this in a pre-work type setting, it gives everybody a voice. And it also gives everybody, especially if you do it in an anonymous way, depending on, like I said, the culture of what's going on in your organization, it gets you some really honest feedback of what's working and what's not, right? And people who are in your organization, whether they're directly involved in your guys' organization or they're partners of your organization, are going to know these few pieces. So they should be driving points of what your goals are, right? Because this is the foundation of where you're at and you know where you want to go. So if you have these really clear, then it becomes really fun because you can start looking at what needs to be true today that's not true to make this happen, right? And then you can start setting your goals. So whether that's an event, whether that is changing some policies and procedures, whether that is putting some more structure in place, or handling some underlying issues, it helps you to start moving forward in the right direction by both healing things that aren't working, not breaking things that aren't broken, and staying focused. So some of the questions that I like to ask is what needs to be true today that's not true to make us get where we want to go in our vision. What are some potential ideas that can move us closer to our vision? What's not working that needs to be different? And then what commitments exist that need to be considered? So if we are in a certain season that we already have a lot of commitments, or we have things that we've already said we're going to do, maybe adding 4 additional events or 4 additional projects, it's a great idea. We should definitely do it, but we can't execute on it, right? So talking through that as you're setting your goals. When you do these brainstorming sessions, all ideas are great, right? And this is why the parking lot's so awesome, because bring them all up. And then when you do these like in a really fun way where everybody gets the opportunity to share their ideas and their different things that you could do, you have that to come back to next time. So once you get all the ideas out there and everybody, and what I will do sometimes depending on the environment is I'll have everybody actually share their ideas, right? We'll brainstorm and then everybody has to put their stuff up. Then you have this huge list of all these different ideas. And then you can start working through what are the ones that move us forward the most, right? So sometimes things feel really urgent, but maybe they're not the most important, right? What's going to make the biggest impact to our vision, to our mission, with the least amount of maybe input, right? So maybe we really need new computers. It's a bad example, but maybe we really need new computers. But if we put the same effort into getting all new computers into this one thing, it moves the entire thing forward, right? It's a really bad example because it's dumb, but you get my point. Like you need to pick the one that moves the mission forward. Once you figure out what idea is the best one, you need to this is where you start talking about like SMART goals. I don't love SMART goals as much as I used to because I think they can be kind of limiting, to be honest with you. I think the most important thing when you're setting your goals is that they're specific, they have a measurement, and they have a timetable. Because these goals that we're talking about are things that you're going to execute in the next 9 months to a year. Your strategic core strategies are things that are towards your 3 to 5 year plan, but these are things that we're going to make happen in the near future, right? So when I say specific, that you need to know what you're actually going to make happen. The measurement needs to be how you're going to define success, right? So it could be numeric, it could be just based on success is this, but everybody needs to know what success is and it needs to be really clear. And then you need to have the timetable of when you want to have it finished by. Another big piece on this when you're assigning these goals in these sessions is someone needs to be responsible, one owner, okay? When there's more than one person responsible, you run into issues. Now, when I say someone's responsible, it does not mean they're doing it all, okay? And that's something that I think people struggle with a lot. I've seen that when we've ran these out, is there'll be someone who's responsible for multiple things and they freak out because they think they have to do it all. When you're the owner responsible, you're responsible to lead a team. And we're going to talk about execution in a second and how you do that well. But as an owner, you're responsible to make sure that we meet the specific item by the measurement that we set, by the timetable that we set, but not by yourself, right? This is where you have to kind of work that leadership muscle. This is really uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? This is really tough and that's totally fine, but it's awesome growth, right? Okay, any questions on setting goals before we jump into execution? So when we get into execution, and I wrote goals and strategy is great, but without execution, nothing happens, right? So each goal, so my brain works, I come from a project management background. That's how I've functioned. And honestly, it makes this so much easier if you run things like a project. So assume each goal, whether the goal is an event, the goal is raising a certain amount of money from a certain area, treat it like a project, okay? So when you treat things this way, it helps you to get really clear on the elements that you need to have to be successful. So each goal should be treated as a project, which means there's an owner responsible and there's a team working on it, right? And I know for some of you guys, there isn't a team, it's just you, right? But the team could be people outside of your organization, right? They could be other resources, they could be other people that are working with you, right? So how do you run a project or a goal successfully? You have a project plan, which is made up of 3 pieces, okay? You have a project team, you have a project calendar, and you have a tool or methodology for how you're going to manage it. I firmly believe that if you have all 3 of these things, this gets so much easier, so much easier. So project outline, first thing is you have to have a deliverable, okay? Everybody on the team has to agree what that deliverable is going to be, okay? You have to have a scope of what the project's going to be. The reason why this is so important is when you start doing something, it's really easy when you get the right team together to start, this thing starts to get bigger, right? It grows. If you have a really clear scope of what the project is, it helps you to decide that we're not going to go outside of, it's called scope creep, where things start to get added and added and added. And then all of a sudden you can't meet your deadlines. You can't, because you don't have the resources for what that now new deliverable is. Okay. This is a great time to put this up on the parking lot list, right? So if everyone agrees at the beginning, and this is so important, everybody has to agree on the outline, calendar, and project team at the beginning before you start. Okay, so everybody has to agree, this is our project plan, this is how we're going to do it. And if you guys are gonna modify it, it's a team effort to modify it, right? If everybody's on the same page, things go better. I truly believe that when people are all clear on what's going on, everybody does better and everybody wants to do good, right? Everybody is doing this for a good reason. Most of the time where we run into issues of not getting things done is people have too many things on their plate. They aren't for sure clear. There was a communication gap on what needed to be done or when, or they don't have the tools in place to keep track of everything, right? I know all of you in this room have to-do lists that are taller than me, right? You have so much stuff going on. You have multiple competing deadlines. It's super easy to miss things by accident. And so when you have a clear expectations, you have a clear timeline, and you have a tool that helps you to be accountable, it becomes really easy, right? And then you're not spending all your time trying to babysit 14 different to-do lists and remembering this one thing from this one organization. I have another board meeting and I have this other thing. It helps you to stay really clear, right? So you need to all agree on the project outline, which includes your deliverable and what the scope of the project is. That includes what's not part of the project. And in the project plans that I do, there's actually a section that says what is outside of scope. So you literally write, we're not going to go here. We're not going to go here. We're not going to go here. The next big thing is picking the right team members, right? When you're doing a project, depending on the size of what it is, you don't want to have 45 team members, right? You can if you have a really strong project manager, but depending on the size of the project. But the most important thing, regardless of the size, is having really clear expectations. So everybody knows when you're part of the project team, this is what you're responsible to do. You have to meet your deadlines. If you're not going to, you need to communicate by then. When you come to meetings, this is how we're going to all function. This is when we're going to have the meetings, right? The same thing goes for the project leader, right? They have expectations too, and they need to be held accountable to making sure they're doing that. Whether that's, I send out the meeting notes at by this time, I check in with you on this time, I keep the project tool updated, whatever those expectations are. If everybody's clear on expectations, people have a much higher chance of being successful with each other. Everything has to be assigned. Okay, so when you start going through the project calendar, the team all needs to know what they're assigned, and that there needs to be one person responsible for an item. When there's more than one person responsible, it tends to cause problems, right? Because it's kind of that saying, like, when everyone's responsible, nobody is, right? And it's not because anyone has ill will or isn't doing it, but if Haley and I are both on the same thing and I think she's got it and she thinks I've got it, now we've got a problem, right? But if I'm responsible, but I know Haley's the best resource, I know I got to make sure it happens, but I'm going to get with her to make sure it does, right? So it changes the energy of responsibility when there's one person. And then the next big thing is getting your calendar. So when you're building out a project plan, we already have an end date and we know what the goal is, right? So a really great way to do this, and depending on the size of the project, if it's a year-long project, I like to have at least four milestones, okay? These are big chunks that get us to our goal. And usually I like to do them on a quarterly basis because it just makes it easy on paper. So when you know the milestones, so let's say in a year, we want to raise $100,000 for this organization. Quick math, you want to do 25,000 per quarter, let's say, okay? So those are your milestones. Once you know your milestones, what are the tasks within each milestone that has to happen, right? So I need to call this person, we need to set up, I don't fundraise, so I don't know the steps. I know you guys all do. So you would set all of your tasks underneath that, and each task would have a person for each quarter, right? So if you're halfway through the quarter and these tasks aren't done, we know we have a problem, right? Now, if I know there's seasonality to raising money, so maybe you actually change the amounts of money based on what makes sense, or you get halfway through the first quarter and you've only raised 10,000, you need 25, and you're like, oh, we're kind of off, you might want to adjust, right? So knowing what those tasks are and having them all assigned at the beginning makes things so much easier, because then you know, okay, I've got 3 months. These are the things I'm responsible for. Here's when they're due, right? And it makes it really, really clear and open. Now, as you're going through the quarter, let's say, and I recommend making sure the project manager's really paying attention to the timeframes. If you're running into an issue, you can adjust your timelines. When you have a good tool, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, when you change one thing, the way that these tools are set up, it changes all your deadlines. So you can see what that one change has an impact for the rest of your project. So you can see where maybe you need to adjust things or change things without having to get to the end and being like, oh crud, now we're in a problem, we can't get this all done in time, right? So when you have a clear project outline, a clear project team, a clear calendar, accountability becomes really easy, right? Everyone's on the same page. And what I have found in running multiple projects like this with multiple different organizations, if you do this up front, you have far less issues. There's still problems because I'm telling you, if there weren't problems, we wouldn't have jobs, right? That's why we exist. So things still go wrong, but a lot of the avoidable things like miscommunication, frustrations with each other, all of those pieces that are honestly just wasted energy that don't actually move you forward at all, pretty much go away. You end up with less frustrated people on the team or frustrated people with each other. And like, let's be honest, frustration is like the biggest wasted energy and the biggest leak in almost every organization. If you're wasting any energy on frustration, it's just taking away from everything else. And it's really expensive in payroll and time and everything else. So project management tools. I am a firm believer that if you have the right tools, you can literally do anything, right? The problem is there's like 1,000 of them, right? And so it's figuring out which one's the right one for you. The right tool is the one that you're going to use and you're committed to using. You're going to have to learn one of them, right? So the one that you are all going to commit to and decide this is the one that we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it is the one that's going to be successful. Any process, anything works that way. I prefer one, and I'll give you guys a couple of examples of tools that I really like. I prefer ones that have reminders and alerts and some sort of hierarchy and automation, because that allows for you to get rid of the manual side of reminding Joe of this, you can set all that up to do it. The hierarchy piece is the one that will allow for it when you make a change of something today. Let's say we're going to give this person an extra 4 days on this item. It will affect the rest of your project so that you can quickly see how that affects things. I believe that it allows a lot of simplicity for your team if it's all in one place. The three that I'm going to recommend or talk to you guys about are all web-based. So when you use a web-based tool, everybody has the most recent version of it, right? I have worked on projects where people do it in Excel, and I think you can do project management in Excel, but the problem with that is that everybody's at the mercy of the most recent version of the copy, right? And if you don't have the most recent version, you got a problem. The other limitation of doing something like that is that you have to keep all the documentation and all the paperwork in a separate place. So if you're using project management tool, like using Excel as a project management tool, that means you have to have Google Drive or OneDrive or something else with all the rest of the documents. You have to have emails for all the rest of the communication. And now you have people going to 3 different places to get information, right? Which then makes them frustrated. And we already talked about what happens with frustration, right? So if you have a tool like one of the 3 I'm going to talk about, it allows you to merge all those things together into one place. So what I've found is if you set your project plan in one of these tools and you make the rule that when you're communicating about this item, you do it in the project tool, not email. We do it here, right? If you're going to give everyone a copy of the item, like let's say it's a document or a contract or an updated something, it goes on the tool. We don't email it. Everything goes there, right? That way, everyone knows where to go for the thing. You're not digging through your email. You're not looking for something. It's all in one place. So I have 3 favorites. It really depends on how your brain is structured on which one you're going to like better. Smartsheet is an amazing tool. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet. It's kind of if Excel, Google Drive, and OneNote, are you guys familiar with all 3 of those products, had a baby, it would be Smartsheet. Okay, so it's Excel based. So if you have a team who likes grids like that, it's super easy to follow, but they do have like Gantt charts and other stuff if you want to use that. It's super, super easy to use. It allows for you to communicate and do proofing like within the tool. It's one of my absolute favorites, to be honest with you. It allows you to share things with people in your organization or not. You can do attachments. It's searchable. So if you're searching for something, it'll search all the sheets that you have. I know it sounds complicated, but I'm telling you, it's super easy. They have amazing templates. I find it the easiest one to adopt quickly because people are used to seeing that interface. ClickUp is a really good option financially. So Smartsheet is not super expensive, but it is an investment. I think it's the light version, I think is like $20 a user. So it's definitely an investment. ClickUp, you can do nearly for free. It's a little bit clunkier, I'm gonna be honest. It has all the same functions, but visually it's a very different interface. So if people aren't used to dealing in a project management tool, it's gonna take a little bit of time to figure out. It's more list-based. So you can build a project plan out, but it's based kind of on lists and then hierarchies. You can have kind of grouped together and have multiple projects, but it reminds me more of like folders and lists. Okay, whereas Smartsheet is more like Excel with attachments. Makes sense. Asana is similar to ClickUp. It's a little bit more expensive. It's more robust for a team, but it has some really awesome communication and to-do list functionality. What I would recommend if you guys are looking at doing one of these is to really think about which one you want to commit to. Because like I said, it's no matter what you do, you're going to have to learn it, right? And whatever one you do, if you commit to it and use it, it will change your organization. So I've implemented Smartsheet and ClickUp in different organizations. And like I said, I think it depends on your brain. Smartsheet worked really great with Atterbury because everybody there was like deep in spreadsheets. They were really used to that. So this was like a very comforting interface. When I did ClickUp, it was in an organization that does social media and they're like more creative minded. And so Smartsheet was like really rigid for them, right? They came from Trello, which Trello is similar to them, but it's like it's board-like. And so it's very, if you're creative minded, it's like Post-it notes everywhere, which makes me like super anxious. So it's not really a fit for me. But that's kind of the point. There's not really this is the one you should use. The best one is the one that you commit to. And all of these options have amazing education that's free as part of having them. And honestly, I don't think you even have to have it to get the free education. But this part right here is the part that is the most important, right? Once you solidify your vision, you know where you're going, you know what you're trying to make happen. Having a tool like this changes everything in your day-to-day. It helps you to go look and see, what do I need to get done today? What do I need to hold the people accountable to do today? I use this for my entire to-do list. So I have projects that I'm running, right? Because I treat everything like a project, even if it's not an actual project. I just treat them all that way because it just helps make it cleaner. But I have my regular to-do list all in there too, right? So I have like reoccurring items that I need to do. I put everything in there because if you go all in on the tool and you use it for everything, you're not going to miss stuff, right? And so like Smartsheet has a way that you can do your to-do lists in there and it can tie to your Outlook and there's all these cool things. So it'll all tie together. So if someone does happen to send you an email, you can just push it straight over to the sheet that it's supposed to go to and all of that. Because as much as you try to put this stuff in place, like 80% of it works and 20% of people just keep doing it the way they were doing it. And that's just part of it. And that's just the way it goes. And depending on the size of your organization and the maturity of your organization, some battles aren't worth fighting, right? So you have to kind of be adaptable. But these tools can be a huge game changer in helping you to feel less overwhelmed and start to see out. One of the great things I do like about Smartsheet that ClickUp and Asana both also have is resource viewer. So it allows you to see if you've got everything assigned and Julie has 150% capacity and John has 80, you need to move some stuff around, right? Or Julie might jump off the building. So it helps you to start to see from a high level, especially if you're overseeing a team where you might have gaps and issues of someone being completely overloaded by accident, right? Because we don't usually do it on purpose. It's just Julie's really good at stuff and whoever I said, John's not. So keep that in mind. When you implement stuff like this, it gives you some really cool views that maybe you didn't have before. But more than anything, it really helps you to move forward towards your vision and your goal. So that is all I have. There's any questions? It's like puked a lot of information in a short period of time.
So like logistically, because we're about to go into a strategic planning session and our board kind of chose to have like a separate committee to handle that. So like, what have you seen be the most successful as far as who you get in on doing strategic planning and even structuring how you do it? I mean, you talked about the 15-minute increments, but do you think doing a full day of that or breaking it out by week, like what do you see being the most successful?
I think so. I've done sessions that are half days. The most recent one we did with Atterbury's board was 3 days. But we did them in those 15-minute increments. We had lunch breaks. So I think it depends on how much you have to get through, right? How big is the organization? How many different things you guys need to evaluate? When we did that one, we did after action plans in different parts of the business. So we had a lot to go through, right? I think it's a matter of making sure you give people a lot of room. Strategic planning is a muscle that we don't work very often. And so it can be really exhausting. I always try to give more space than is probably needed. And that's what happened. We ended up finishing, we booked it out for 3 days and we finished in 2.5. Because people, when they have room, they don't feel stressed, and they come up with better ideas. And this is really heavy stuff. So I think it depends on how big of items you need to address, and how much
I have a
alignment.
lot.
Yeah, so then I would like, and when you start laying out your actual sessions, what's your deliverable goal for each one? And do you have enough time to get there while allowing, because it depends on the people you have, right? So if you have 4 people, you can probably move a little faster because then everybody has time to talk, you can get through it. But if you have 9, that might not be enough time depending on what your deliverable is that you're trying to make happen. So I try to reverse engineer what I'm trying to create, right? So if you know the goal is we're going to solidify our 5-year vision, but you know today no one has any idea what that is, hours probably not enough time, right? But if everyone's really pretty clear and we've had the same vision for the last 30 years, and we just want to make sure we're all on the same page and there's 4 of us, an hour is probably plenty of time, right? At that point, you're kind of just, refining and making sure we're also on the same page and this is still where we see where we're going. So it really depends on how much you're trying to get done and how many people, because when you're facilitating something like this, the worst thing that can happen is everybody not getting a voice. If you invite them to the table and you invite them to come and be part of it, if they don't, everyone isn't all treated equally. And that's something that I think is super important in your roles when you come, especially when you have a board, right? There's different hierarchies, right? So there are people who are the owner, and then you have the CEO, or you have people who have different levels of, I don't want to say importance, but impact in the business. Everybody needs to be on an equal playing field when you're having these sessions so that you truly get to where you're trying to go. And that almost, depending on the culture of the organization, needs to be said, right? And then depending on how the personalities are, you need to leave space. So I would always say leave more and get done early than try to compress it and stress out the team. Does that answer your question? Okay.
How often, you set your strategic plan and then, say it is 3 to 5 years, how often do you bring the team back together, revisit it, make sure everybody's still on the same page, see if there's any adjusting that needs to be done? Do you at all?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I believe that you should do this big strategic plan we were just talking about, where you set your year out on an annual basis. I think that you should check in quarterly. So I think it's super important that you guys get together every 3 months and fill in on what's going on, right? So everybody was assigned a goal. Where are we at? Are we on track? Another big piece on doing that is, has the world changed in such a way that this is no longer the right direction? So you look at last year. If you guys did all this in December of last year, and then January rolled around, we're rolling. If you got together in April, things would be a little different, right? Because of what happened in the world, something we could not have begun to even think that was going to happen. So I think it's really important that you check in quarterly for accountability, and to make sure that you're still focused on the right things. Because as the environment changes, maybe that needs to be tweaked a little bit. If you only get together once a year, then you're just like, everybody waits till the end of the year to get the thing done. And then it's like, rush, start the next year. So I believe that you should be checking in quarterly on all of your goals and where you're at to make sure you're on track, but that you should do this exercise at least on an annual basis to make sure that you're still moving forward. Your 3 to 5 year goal may not change that much, right? But the how should. And if you're executing your goals annually, you should be out of things to do, right? And it should be time to get new ones, right? And hopefully, if you execute it really well, you can push yourself to the next level and do bigger things that were on the parking lot from last year.
So when you're implementing a project management tool, when you've never had one, that seems really overwhelming.
It is.
So what's the expectation for the implementation? How much time would you spend in that when you're still trying to get the actual things that need to get done? Like, how do you balance that?
That's a great question. So depending on the size of your organization, I try and start small, right? I personally love the tool. So like, I'm all in, right? I'll build it all and then we'll just figure it out. But you have to be mindful of your team and how much they can take, right? If you already have them all overwhelmed and overloaded with a bunch of stuff, and then you're like, oh, and on top of that, learn this new thing and do everything in it starting Monday, right? And it's Friday. That's a lot, right? So I would do it in chunks, maybe do one project, right? Depending on your resources and the amount of time and effort you have, putting the initial project in, because of the way these tools are all structured and the templates they have, is actually not that time consuming. You can get them in, depending on the size of your project, you'd be surprised how quickly you could actually get it in there. The adoption part is what's going to take longer, right? Rolling it out with your team is going to take longer. So be realistic based on what your team is comfortable with. If you have a team who likes technology and likes to adopt things, you might be able to go faster, right? I've done both. If it makes you feel any better, I've done both. And honestly, depending on the member of the team who maybe isn't as technologically excited, sometimes you can kind of bridge the gap. Like I said, we have like 80% adoption, right? There's going to be people on the team who it's not worth the fight, right? But you can still make sure that the information is there. And you also have to decide for yourself and your team where you want to go. And maybe this is a hard no for you. Maybe they just need to step up and it just needs to happen. Or the amount of effort, the amount of impact they bring to the team, if they are only getting part of that part done, that's okay too. You just have to decide, because if you sanction incompetence on certain things, it causes other problems on your team. So you have to decide, you have to balance that. That's up to you guys. But I try to do, if it's a team that I know is going to have a harder time adopting new things, I do one. And then we say, okay, on this project, and I'm big about giving like one sheets that are just like, you just have to do these 3 things, right? So if you adopt a project management tool and you're like, okay, weekly, I need you to log in, update this line. I need you to read any new attachments that are going to be in this color, and I need you to make a note on this. I know it seems overwhelming, but all I need you to do is log in and do these 3 things once a week, right? If you can do it like that, even if you go through and explain the whole thing and they're like super overwhelmed and they're like, because I literally had to do this with numerous parts of the team, right? And some parts of the team loved it, right? They were the people that are spending all their time doing like AR, AP, and they're used to being on computers are like, this is great. The other team who was like out in the field was like, you want me to do what? I have to do what? Like, I'm not, this is stupid. I'm not getting on this thing, right? So I did the same training for everybody, but at the end, I know this seems overwhelming, but all you have to do are these 3 things, right? All of these tools have mobile apps too that are really robust. So even if people push back about, well, I don't have time to get on my computer and do all of that. Okay, do it from your phone, right? I just need you to get on, update this one line, check this one thing, send this one message, right? So pick the 3 most important things. People can do 3 things, right? So that would be how I'd recommend doing it. Now, if your team can handle more, cool. Do all the projects on there, and these are the 3 things you need to do on these 4 sheets or these 4 projects. It just really depends on, and you're going to know best what your team can do. When they've been doing that for 4 to 6 weeks, add another one. And then, I mean, that's just kind of do it incrementally to where, and honestly, even if your team isn't engaging in it, if you're managing all the projects, like I've had multiple projects where I ran the project management tool, they didn't engage with it, but I kept it updated. Right? I use it as a tool for me. So even if they're not comfortable engaging, or you're not in a position where you can actually, I don't want to say force, but you can ask them to do it, right? Or hold them accountable to it because of the role that you're in, you can still use the tool for yourself, right? To keep it straight, to keep it clean. And maybe they're not going in updating, but you're holding them accountable using the same tool. So I run everything with it, whether someone else is engaging with it or not, because it's my tool. So does that help? Okay.
She had suggested, I had asked her when I started at WT, I had all these different projects and all these things, and I was trying to figure it out. She had suggested ClickUp, which I did because it's free.
Yeah.
But I started with just using it for my personal life.
Yeah.
And that helped me like, oh, so this is how I'd use it for this. Or this is, I mean, it just kind of just playing with it. The templates are so easy.
Yeah.
And it's been
Good. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, but I use it for myself, whether or not anybody else cares. I don't care if anyone else is going to play with it, but it does help me because like I'll at any point have 10 or 12 projects going. And that's a lot to try and keep in your head. And so I used to not do that, for the record. I used to try to manage it all in my inbox, and I had a really like awesome paper calendar, and I did okay, but I was super stressed all the time, right? I was always worried I was forgetting something. I would like highlight things, and I'd like drink a lot of coffee, and I last night. That's down. And so when I put the right tools in place, it became really a lot easier, right? So I can also see like, next week's gonna suck a little bit. Okay, well, at least I know that going into it. And I don't find that out like as it's hitting me in the face, right? Which I feel like helps a lot too. So.
There's a question in the chat
Oh,
from
I didn't even see that.
Keith. He says, how do members of a team determine their own milestones? If a team is responsible for raising 100,000 in a quarter, how does each member know how they are tracking?
So, okay, so team member determine their own. So what I would say is the team, if I'm understanding your question, Keith, the team as a whole would decide what the milestones are. So if the team's responsible for raising 100,000 in a quarter, so if you're responsible for 100,000 per quarter, so then I would divide that up, however makes most, I don't raise money. So you guys know the best way to make that happen. And I would, if it's $100,000 a quarter, then that would be like $33,000 a month, ish. So I would divide it out by month and hold people accountable. Depending on, for me, I don't know how easy is it to raise $100,000 in a quarter? Okay, so I was like, that seems like a lot of money to me. So depending on how difficult that is, to me, that would change the amount of accountability that I would want from the team. So if we need to be tracking this, is that something we need to track on a daily basis, on a bi-weekly basis? That would dictate how frequently I would want them to update where they were at. If I was responsible to manage, just based on what you're telling me, I'd probably build a project plan that included keeping, so within all of these tools, they, at least for sure, Smartsheet, I'm pretty sure ClickUp will do this, you can have calculated fields. So I would have a section for the group and probably, raise this much money and have a person's name assigned. And I would have them update in a column that said like current amount raised. And it would calculate the bottom for me, or the top probably, how much money we had already. So you could keep all that in one place. The other cool thing about that too is I'm assuming when you guys get donations and stuff, there's like some sort of contractual agreement and all of that goes with it. So you could actually have your team be responsible for updating, like they add in that line of their responsibility, they put their contract, they submit it to that. So it's all in one place. And then they update how much money they have. So maybe they have if you guys, I could show you what it looks like. I'm like visually seeing it, but you guys are just seeing me, so it's confusing. So you can have multiple lines, right? So I would have like John's donations, and let's say it's his goal, and I'd have goal would be $33,000 this month, and then I would have like the amount that he's raised, and he could fill that out, and then like the percent to goal, and then I would have each place where he could put each person or each organization donated money so that you could see the total and have all of their documents all in one place. It's probably how I would structure that particular one. But if you have questions, I can get you guys my contact info and I can walk through any of this stuff with you guys. I do consultations and hourly stuff. So and building something like that out wouldn't take me but like an hour to get that, something of that's based on the simplicity I'm understanding from the question. But that's probably how I would structure it. And then I would make my team responsible for updating that whenever they got new donations and putting all the information there. The other great thing is then you have one sheet that has all of the contracts, all of the information and everything. That's really awesome about all these tools. It's all time-stamped. So it all tells you exactly when the person added it, when they changed it, when they put it on there. So it helps you to know what's going on and when things are changing. And then you can even set it up where when something's added, it sends a notification when, or at the end of the day. So that way you can know right away what's going on without having to go dig through the sheet to know what's changed, what's different. So that way you're not constantly like, did you do this, team member? Did you do that? Hey, John, what's your update? Hey, John, what's going on? Like you can just go look and then be like, way to go, John, killing it. Or, hey, John, what's going on, right? Without having to, did you? Because I know as a team member, that totally sucks to have someone constantly bugging you. So that's how I would probably structure that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Are there any other ones out there? Oh, okay. Any other questions at all? Cool. Well, thank you guys. It's really great talking.
Thank you for being here today. That was really great. I appreciate it. I think all of us took something from it, regardless of if it is
I want to house this knowledge to use that later and maybe call you, or I need to implement something now. So I appreciate that. So next month, May 20th is our next event. We are doing Wilson Lemieux, and he is going to talk about storytelling. It's going to be really, really great. And I think y'all will all definitely take something from it for your organization. So we hope to see y'all back. And then if you are not a member of AFP and you want to be, it's very simple. And we also have scholarships available to help pay those dues and offset your costs. So if you are not a member, see me or Jody. Jody can get you taken care of. And we would love for you to be a member. It's super easy to do and be a part of, and you'll get all of our information. So that's all I have today. Y'all stay, network, talk. That's what else this is about, is us here together as a group. So thank y'all for being here. Everyone, thank you for attending on Zoom. We appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful day.